Hoffman, and I am the Advocacy Coordinator at Summit Independent Living Center. And I want to welcome, first of all, the audience to the Missoula Coalition for Disability Rights 2008 Legislative Candidates Forum. There's a wide array of organizations that make up the coalition, including Missoula Aging Services, Adapt Montana, Summit Independent Living Center, Home and Community-Based Services, Western Montana Mental Health Center, Opportunity Resources, and a whole variety of others that I'm not going to list all of them, but and so I'm going to now welcome all of the legislative candidates to the forum. How this is going to work, and everybody, we're going to go through a list of questions. I'm not going to go through in any order. All of you should have received them via email or via mail. And so every candidate's going to have 2 minutes to answer every question. Jude Monson's going to be our timekeeper today.
Oh, and I was just going to say, if you go over time, I'll do the time thing.
And that's just so we can get through the questions so that we can have the very end of today for you guys to interact with the audience and for the audience to ask you guys questions instead of just taking questions from me. So once again, thank you all for coming. And to start off, we're just going to go down the line once and a 1-minute introduction if you guys can stay who you are, what district you're running for, and whatever else you want to say within that 1 minute. And so let's start over here with Will Deshaw. And please use the microphones because we are filming this and it will be broadcast on MCAT.
Okay, well, the minute I get technologically advanced here, we're going to testing. Number one, my name is Will Deshaw, and I'd like to thank Jude and Travis for inviting me again. I think this is my third time at one of these forums, and I always learn something new every time I attend, and that's why we come here. I'm running for House District 98, which is out on Mullen Road. It starts actually at Burton Street and goes toward the railroad track. Better yet, it would be across from the Bruce Blattner building, I believe is in my district. And it goes down the river, down 3rd Street, up 7th Street, back across the river and to the airport. So it's kind of a far-flung district. I've lived there all my life. I've served on the school board there. I'm in my 12th year now as a school board member. And I just appreciate being here because without knowing what your wants, needs, and wishes are, there's no way a legislator can actually go to Helena and have a real feeling or touch for what you need. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Linda Fry, and I'm running for House District 94, which starts at Rymel Road and snakes down the hill all the way over to Higgins, between Higgins and Russell, and then up the hill between Whitaker and Russell. I appreciate the opportunity that Jude and Travis offered to me to find out their concerns and the time that they're taking. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Candy Matthew Jenkins. I'm running for Senate District 50. Senate District 50 incorporates House District 99, which is from Madison Street to Grant Creek, and then up to Frenchtown and over toward Arlete. And then it crosses over the mountains there somewhere into the Lolo area. When Will mentioned Bruce Blattner, I remember I took a speech course from him at the VOTAC. And I've also worked as a nurse aide in a nursing home and done home health care. And so I'm a little bit aware of needs. My husband's best friend is a paraplegic, and his grandfather is a quadriplegic, and I have a deaf sister. So these issues are important to me. And I'm also mother of 6 kids, so, you know, you never know what the future holds. So thank you.
I'm Diane Sands. I'm running for my 3rd term from House District 95, which is another slice of Missoula. I won't even go into it. And these issues are important to me as well. I have a family member, a sister-in-law, who's severely developmentally disabled, and so these are part of my day-to-day life. And I want to thank the coalition for, again, sponsoring this, because I think it's really an important way to learn what the needs are, how well we've done in the last session, and what we need to do for the next session. Thanks.
I'm Dave McAlpin. I represent House District 94, running for my 3rd term. I serve on the Health Committee. I've served on that committee for 2 years, so we have heard a lot of the issues that are important to you in that committee, serving with Diane and Michelle Reinhardt on that committee. I also serve in a leadership capacity as the Minority Whip of the House, and I believe I have the distinction of having chosen the only disabled page that we've ever seen in the legislature. Rachel Chancellor is now a senior at Big Sky High.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carol Williams. I am running for my second term in the Senate, unopposed. I have been an advocate for issues on disability for pretty much all of my life. One of my first jobs was as a Head Start teacher in the school system. I currently serve, the governor appointed me to the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities, where I continue to serve. And I'm anxious to be here one more time, again with you all, to hear what your agenda is for the next session. I want to thank Travis and Jude for putting it together. And I want to apologize ahead of time. I am going to have to sneak out a little early. I came to you today with a really bad bronchial cough and sinus infection, and I'm going to see the doctor finally at 1:30 today. So if I sneak out, I'm sure everybody will fill me in on what happened in between. Thank you.
That mic needs to be turned on.
Oh, well, didn't you hear me?
We heard you.
Just sorry about that.
Now?
There we go.
I'm Dick Barrett. I'm running for House District 93 seat. This is my first outing in politics, so I have no history in the legislature to report to you. I am happy to be here today and thankful that the coalition is putting on this forum so that I can hear more about the issues that are involved.
I'm Robin Hamilton, running for my third term as representative for House District 92, which in Missoula is a little bit of eastern downtown Missoula and the whole Rattlesnake Valley.
I'm Willis Curdy. I'm running for House District 100. This is my first foray into partisan political office. I was prohibited by federal law, being a federal employee, from running for political office. So my first foray, so I don't have a lot of experience in terms of legislation. I taught high school here in Missoula for 30 years, and I had many disabled students mainstreamed in my classroom. So I'm familiar with some of the disability issues, especially when it comes to schools and special ed. I also have a sister-in-law who had a severe case of polio and is severely, well, I would say pretty severely disabled because of it.
Hi, I too want to thank you for having us all here. I'm Ron Erickson. Presently, House District 93, running for Senate District 47. That's Vicky Cacciarella's old Senate district. It is not a race because I don't have an opponent. I'm really pleased about that part of it. I also simply want to comment, I have not had the direct experience, other than meeting some of you when I've gone door to door, of having family members who are disabled. But I want to comment on the great information and questionnaire that you've put together for us today. Because frankly, we need folks like you to give us the issues and give the issues to us clearly, and this is really a great job at that.
Hi, my name is Teresa Henry, and I'm running for re-election to represent House District 96. This would be my third term. I did not serve on the Health and Human Services Committee during the session last time, but I currently serve on the Interim Children, Family, Health and Human Services Committee, so I've been aware of and keeping up on some of the issues. For my day job, I teach nursing. My paycheck comes from MSU, but I work on the U of M campus, so I'm a little schizophrenic about football. And just about everything else related to sports, I guess. Most of my experience with the disability and aging community is the fact that I teach nursing, and almost all of the agencies have had my nursing students on projects or in clinical or in some kind of an experience, so I've tried to keep up on that. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Betsy Hans. I'm running for a second term in House District 99. And my familiarity with issues with disabilities comes from my brother who had a motorcycle accident when I was 14. So I grew up with someone who was going through occupational and physical therapy, living in the home, carrying him up the stairs because our home was not accessible, and finding personal care attendants for him. My mother has been a longtime advocate and has been a big mentor for me in my professional career. I've worked for the last 6 years in affordable housing with a group called Homeward, who works very closely with its residents. I was the community organizer when I first started there, and I've been the executive director. I just stepped down from there as the executive director for the last 2 years. One of my most shining stars, achievements that I think is really neat about Homeward is we actually had a visitability and accessibility charrette for our latest project, so that we were really looking at the issues needed in housing for people with disabilities and making sure that our project was the most inclusive it could be. And that project's being developed right now, built on Russell and Broadway. It's the old Liberty Lane site. Thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you all. Carol, because the microphone was not on when you were introducing yourself, we did not capture that on camera, so I was wondering if you could possibly do that one more time.
Okay, how's it going this time?
Better.
My name is Carol Williams. I currently represent Senate District 46 and am running for my second term for that job. I currently serve as the majority leader of the Montana Senate and on the Public Health Committee and the Senate Finance and Claims Committee. I'm delighted to be here with you all again today. This has been an important forum every time I've run. Every time I've run, we learned more and more about the issues that are out there in the community that we may not bump into every day. And this is a really important place for us to be able to do that. I've been a long-term advocate for folks with disabilities, including I currently serve on the Governor's Council for Developmental Disabilities now, and was a former special ed teacher. So with that, I'll give it to the person who just snuck in.
Thank you.
No, they've already.
I'm Representative Michelle Reinhardt. I'm sorry I'm late. Like many folks, I have a full-time job and just came from a public hearing, and I have another one at 1:30, so I'll have to sneak out too. But your perspective and your ideas and concerns are very important to me, and I'd like your ideas for legislation as well. We saw a lot of good things that came from constituents and folks like you last time for the last session, and I think it made a big difference, whether it was for improving the health care and the wages for CNAs and for nurse assistants, whether it's for improving access or care for all. That's for disabled, for the poor, for the mentally ill. That's all very important, I think, to all of us at the table here. I did sit on the Health and Human Services Committee last time, and I'm not sure where the committee assignments will end up with the next session, but if I'm there again, I think we can continue to make some headway on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you all. Tim Fury, who is running for Montana House District 91, who couldn't be here, but he did submit a letter, and so I'm going to read that really fast. Dear coalition members, I'm sorry I will not be able to be with you this afternoon. I was recently elected to chair the DPHHS Rates Commission. We are meeting at the same time as your forum. I would like to just take a moment to share with you my excitement about the 2009 legislative session. I also want to share with you my long history of serving as a volunteer or as a staff member for several local, state, and national organizations serving individuals with disabilities. For most of my career, I've been employed in community therapeutic recreation. I have worked for Opportunity Resources, Easter Seals, Camp Make a Dream, Special Recreation Associations, Courage Center, Special Olympics, and Special Olympics. I have been a life member of the Disabled American Veterans for nearly 35 years. I am ready and willing to support your platform and will definitely consider sponsoring or co-sponsoring bills for the coalition. See you in Helena. Sincerely, Tim Fury. Okay, so let's get started here. The first question I'm going to pose to you guys comes from Aging Services Networks. from the Aging Services Network. And it is funding aging services. The aging services community received a small shot in the arm when the 2007 legislature appropriated to it an additional $3 million of an $8 million request to assist in the backfill of much-needed services for Montana's rapidly growing aging population. However, as we approach the coming legislative session, much has changed. Gas prices, an important component of people's budgets, but a large expense for Meals on Wheels and senior transportation services, have doubled. And this vulnerable population of older Montanans has not only grown, it's become poorer. Poverty among, adding to the aging services challenge, the $3 million appropriated in the last session is already gone and has not been included in the latest version of the executive budget. A vulnerable population of aged, homebound elderly is at risk of being forgotten. Ironically, the consequences of failing to provide services to seniors living in their homes are ultimately higher public costs of nursing homes. The ability to deliver a meal, relieve a caregiver, perform shopping duties, or to provide a ride to the doctor's office can contribute greatly to a person's ability to not only manage but enrich the day-to-day routine of life. This is one of many reasons adequately funding aging services programs is critical to the well-being of many Montana families. Local aging services have managed to this point with generally increased local government assistance, but more and more communities across the state are finding it necessary to hold special mill levies to support aging services. In the face of stagnant state funding, poverty tax-based support for aging services has doubled in just a few years, but are rapidly increasing property taxes the right funding solution? An increase in state funding is needed, and it is needed now. Towards that end, aging service advocates will be engaging in discussions with legislators and candidates around the state, demonstrating that a high degree of public support exists for making certain that Montana's vulnerable aging population is not forgotten. $9 million is less than 0.001% of the state budget. Surely our oldest Montanans are worth that. So the question is, and we'll start over here with Will again, would you vote yes on adequately funding aging services, and if not, with state funds, and if not, where would you propose that those funds come from? 2 minutes.
Thank you, Travis. Well, in the first place, people that are homebound or want to be stay in their home ought to be able to stay there. And if they are truly, truly needy, then we as a populace owe them the duty of making sure that they live life to the fullest in their homes. I would vote for some increase in funding. Not having been in the legislature, I can't talk with any expertise on where those dollars come from, how much is needed. The word adequately always bothers me because it's like shooting at a balloon sometimes. You're not sure which way it's going to go. But I would be in favor of increasing the funding to make sure that people are taken care of in their homes.
Thank you. I agree with Will. I think it's important to care for our elderly, to allow them to keep in their homes. And I think it's important that the society as a whole cares for the vulnerable. I do not think that that should be funded through property taxes, because increasingly property taxes are hitting the elderly within our community, and I would not like to see them forced out of their home because of the property tax increase. So yes, I would support funding, but again, like Will, I don't know how much that would be, and I don't know again what adequately would mean.
Well, I'm going to have to ditto Will and Linda, except for the fact that I feel that we need to increase more family participation and be able to encourage families and help subsidize families taking care of their parents or elderly in their own homes as long as they can. Unfortunately, I've been a recipient of many of the negative type of situations for many of our elderly and what I have been doing in the last 7 to 8 years. And I see that there's sometimes too much government intervention in the home care or the desires of the elderly to stay at home and receive care there from family members or people of their choice. or select a private care provider. And I definitely would have to look at the budget to see where those taxes are coming, and if there are openings to investigate whether family members really want to take care of the parents first or the grandparents first. I think that we need to consider those options before taking more taxpayer money.
Well, like all of us, I think there isn't a person in Montana who doesn't think that we should be providing quality care and probably more care for many of the components of our society, whether they be the elderly or our children or the mentally ill or the disabled. We have a lot of critical needs in the state. And I think that's one of the important points to make about the purpose of government. The purpose of government in many ways is to help us as a total society provide for those needs of our citizens that are best met by our joining together to do that as a collective effort. It's sort of the using the commonwealth for the common good model. However, how we do this, I think, is one of the difficult questions. I know we put some additional funding into aging services last session, and I assume we will put some additional funding into it this time. How much, I don't know. It's important to me, of course, personally, like many of us, I have an elderly mother who's using some of these services in Billings, and I know all of us can expect in our older years, or want to expect, that those services will be available to us in our community. How we do that, I think, is the issue, and the first cut at this will be by the Appropriations Committee of the House and the Senate and the Human Services Committee, and I don't think anyone on this, well, Carol, you serve on Appropriations? She serves on Appropriations and begins to make that decision. Clearly, it's got to be a combination of federal money, state money, local money, private money that provides these services. One of the things we've been doing in the interim health committee is to look at, are we actually maximizing the funding and the different resources that are available for mental health services? And perhaps we need, I know there's a lot of attention at looking at studies of the growing population of the elderly in Montana, what kind of services they will require and how we can adequately provide for that. Because I think doing it in a concerted, studied way is the way to go versus what we unfortunately frequently do, and you probably feel it, is throw all of you into the Human Services appropriation kettle and let you fight it out for who's got the best lobbyists, who can bring the most people to Helena. It's a really tough job to decide how to allocate very limited resources, and the people who do that on those committees are amazing in their ability to try to find a balance between the needs of many of the different services that we have. But of course, we all support providing that care. It's just how do we do it?
Thanks. I agree with Diane. The easy part of this question is yes, we'll support you. The hard part, which may or may not have been answered so far, is how. I'll let my actions speak louder than words. One of the things I've done in the last decade is I've written and helped sponsor the initiative to raise the tobacco tax by $1 a pack. And that's a hard thing to do, not because I like the tobacco companies anyway, but it is hard to go out there and find the dollars that go to things like a portion of that revenue went to the trust fund for seniors. And we sent some to CHIP, we sent some to a small business insurance program, but those are the hard tasks, the heavy lifting that you should demand an answer from your candidates on.
Thank you. I think those answers are all good ones. I think the one thing we need to preface this by is to talk a little bit about what existing funding is going to be there during the next session. There have been a lot of things in the paper recently about this huge budget surplus that we have in Montana. And actually, when you go through it, this budget surplus, and you get down to the nitty-gritty of what really is going to be there for us to deal with on ongoing spending for next session, we're going to be looking at somewhere around $200 million, which isn't very much when you think of all of the people out there that are going to be competing for that. Saying that, and I'm going to talk a little briefly about two of the questions you have because I do have to go out to this doctor's appointment. I am totally committed to helping any of these programs that you've listed here that you wanted us to visit with you today, given the issues of the budget and where it fits in to the entire budget. is something that I think any of us sitting at this table are going to have to deal with one at a time. I will say, though, on the aging services question, that was something I worked really hard on last session. We tried to get more money. The $3 million was not nearly adequate. We knew it wasn't nearly adequate. And we tried very hard to increase that and weren't able to. I'm committed to doing that again. And the Older Montana's Trust Fund, one of the questions you asked earlier, that was my bill. It was something that I worked really hard on. I think we need to continue to put money into that endowment so that in 2011, when we have more and more seniors that are going to be requiring services, we're going to have more money in order to do that. And there is currently nothing, there are a couple bills on, in drafting now about the Older Montana's Trust Fund. I'm a great advocate of it and hope to help further that next session. Thank you.
I support adequately funding aging services, and in terms of where the funding comes from, I think we have to better connect the dots between all the different social services that are on the table. The reality is Montana will have one of the 4th oldest populations in the nation within the next decade. Susan Kohler has called it the silver tsunami, and it's coming. It includes my parents and my grandparents. We must take care of our seniors and not let them fall through the cracks. A third of our folks cannot drive. They're too young, too old, or disabled, and so we need to have adequate transportation services. And with rising gas prices, that's something that we have to factor in into our transportation design. In terms of mental health services, Diane touched on it earlier. That's an important component of taking good care of our elderly population, as well as some of the other things that we'll be discussing with Medicare, Medicaid, and how we address the rising healthcare costs. Again, we have to connect the dots. What I would like to see is investments in prevention, and that includes keeping folks in their home and things that will save us money in the long run. And I would also like to see that with corrections, if we adequately fund some of these services, we can keep folks from ending up in the correction system that don't need to be there, and we can cut funds on the correction side and transition it back to important services like agency services. As other folks have said, we do have to live within our means. We have to balance the budget, but we have to take good care of our elderly folks. Thanks.
One of the liabilities, I think, of being at this end of the table is that an awful lot of very smart things have been said already, and it's hard to add too much to that. I'll say this, that I believe that providing aging services is an important and essential responsibility of government, and adequately funding those services to the extent that that's possible, given the constraints of the budget, is absolutely important as well. It is going to be a problem that's going to get bigger, a lot bigger, because as Michelle says, we are going to be one of the oldest states in the nation in the not too far distant future. And we can't rely on property taxes because, as Linda and others have noted, property taxes badly affect older Montanans. So it does require support from the state. The whole issue of the budget, I think, is, I mean, the way that I look at this issue of, how are we going to do it within the budget is this. It was we go out and we talk on doors to people. There's all kinds of people with terribly pressing needs. And we know that that's the case. We also know that we're going to possibly be acting under court orders with respect to funding education. We know that we're going to be addressing the CHIP program conceivably through a referendum. There are all kinds of demands being made, and they're all important. I mean, one of the difficult and heartbreaking things about this is to try and reconcile or balance out these various kinds of needs. Every dollar we spend somewhere is a dollar we can't spend somewhere else. And that's the tough reality of the situation. So I say yes, I want to support adequately funding aging services, but I also recognize that when you do that, there's something else that might slip through the cracks.
I don't have much to add to that, except that I will just tell you that personally I've supported disability issues. I don't think you keep a record, Travis, but I think I have a 100% voting record for disability issues. I voted for the bill last session that gave us $3 million, which was not enough. But I didn't get to set that number. I'll support it again. Obviously, we'll work within budget constraints. As a matter of fact, I have sympathy with all of these issues. And depending on what shape a bill is when it comes in front of me, there's a good chance you'll have my vote. But I need your help there. We all need your help. You need to come to us when there's a bill up, especially someone like me who doesn't have expertise in this field, and keep me informed. So keep on doing it, Travis.
Well, like I said, I can't say anything much more than that, what's been said. But the one thing, I as much as the budget can, I will support adequately funding Missoula Aging Services and Aging Services statewide. But one other thing we need to keep in mind, and somebody mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that we work with private agencies, the federal government, as what they're doing, and that we act in a concerted, coordinated effort. Duplication does not work. We may need to do things locally to reduce the costs of transportation and the like, but still maintain adequate transportation for all of our seniors who need that service. And, I've been to a couple Aging Services dinners and talked to folks about what the needs are, especially with Meals on Wheels. And there's a lot of things we can do to adequately fund, but do it in a responsible, ethical, and environmental way. So anyway, I do support, again, budget constraints, but we need to work together with all the interested parties to make this coordinated, effective, efficient operation.
Thank you. I will give you a slightly different perspective. I don't serve, I never have served on the House Appropriations Committee. I don't serve on the health committees. I have always served on the tax committees in the House, and I'm hoping to serve on the tax committee in the Senate. One way to look at the system that we have right now is people are very anxious to ask for money, but not very anxious to ask for more tax revenue. So there's the size of a pie, and everybody argues about what portion to take for, say, aging services. In fact, there are some methods that we need to use to increase the size of the pie. Last time, in the House committee that several of us served on, both Dave McAlpin, Robin Hamilton, and I all served on that House Tax Committee. We saw 11 tax cheat bills come to us. The Republicans voted down every one of them. There was about $44 million extra. We're going to bring those bills back. Let me give you just one example. We have in the corporate tax realm a possibility for major corporations to hide income overseas. Walmart does not own their own buildings or land. It's owned by a wholly owned subsidiary. That subsidiary exists in Florence, Italy. Because they're able to move revenue overseas, they pay less corporate tax in this state and in other states. The state of Illinois, that's the only reason I can mention Walmart. The state of Montana won't tell us which companies are hiding stuff overseas. The only reason I know about Walmart is that the state of Illinois has the same tax code as we have in a portion of it, and they've sued them to try to get the money back. So we need to be able to have the revenue so that we can actually fund aging services and many of these other services. I'm not of the mind to say corp tax should go directly. Corp tax should go directly to aging services. I do trust the system. I'll trust it even more if we can get a Montana legislator on the Appropriations Committee. I trust the system to let the rest of us know the best way to appropriate the money.
Hi, I will be brief. You've heard all of that. Yes, I support the programs. The challenge will be the budget. What I would do is also recommend your participation in ongoing discussion when we talk about tax refunds, to clarify to people that for some of us, $300 or $400 of a tax refund would be better used to support aging services or any number of these programs. But that's the deal we have to have with our constituents. We have to say that. I don't want a tax refund. I want to invest it in my folks.
Hi, I agree with what's been said. I do support aging services and have seen the value that they bring to people's lives, and I agree with what Ron and Teresa just said, so I will pass this on to Cliff, who can introduce himself first.
I will introduce myself, and apologies for being late, but I was at another interview. I'm sure that many of you recognize that right now all of us candidates are sort of overwhelmed by invitations, and I apologize because this is certainly one that I intended to appear at. I am friends with Aging Services. Back in the 70s, I lived in Eugene, Oregon, and I was a member of the Area Agency on Aging when money was easy to get. The creation of the area agencies on aging at that time was a preeminent kind of an appealing social policy issue of the federal government. Unfortunately, that momentum has not carried through to today. And to answer the question, I am a supporter of senior services, and I would support increase in support. The devil's in the details, and I'd sort of mimic what I heard Ron alluding to. Once we get there, we do our very best to help you.
Thank you. And just so you know, we've been doing 2 minutes per answer. We're going to cut this down, the next answers, to, I'm going to do 1.5 minutes, just so we can get more than one question before some people have to leave. The next, leave it down there. The next question has to do with Medicaid buy-in program and authorizing the state to implement one of those programs. For individuals with disabilities, the fear of losing health care and related services is one of the greatest barriers keeping them from maximizing their employment and earnings potential, or from allowing them to go to work at all. 2 federal laws were passed, the Balanced Budget Act of 1997 and the Ticket to Work and Work Incentives Improvement Act of 1999, that authorized states to enact Medicaid buy-in programs for workers with disabilities. These federal laws opened a window of opportunity for state policymakers to increase awareness and refocus attention on the critical issue of how to improve the quality of life for persons with significant disabilities by increasing their level of economic self-sufficiency. Their quality of life could be enhanced, while at the same time reducing or eliminating their dependency on other federal and state cash assistance programs such as housing assistance, LEAP, food stamps, those sorts of things. For working age adults with disabilities who want to work, obtaining, returning, or maintaining employment can be a challenging commitment, especially when these individuals oftentimes need to choose between being employed or having health care coverage that covers the services and supports they depend on, such as personal assistance services, high prescription drug costs, mental health services, developmental disability services, and the sort. That they depend on in order to survive on a day-to-day basis. 2 of the most difficult challenges faced by low and middle-income workers with disabilities include the limited availability of employer-based private individual health insurance coverage, and the possibility that increased earnings could lead to ineligibility for public coverage. The first problem with the private health insurance is they don't cover the services that many people with disabilities rely on, such as personal assistance services, extensive mental health services, and those kinds of things. The second, the ineligibility for services. Right now, the way that you become eligible for Montana Medicaid is that many people with disabilities become eligible for Medicaid is the medically needy program. The income limit for that is $645. Thanks to all of you for that were there last session that increased that by $100 over the past 2 years. It used to be $545. And so in order to be Medicaid eligible, nobody can have over $645 unless the person is an SSI recipient. And so say a person got a $1,000 SSDI check in a month, their spend down is $355 every month so they can get Medicaid. But say they are able and wanted to go to work and they earned another $1,000 that month. So they got that $1,000 SSDI, $1,000 paycheck. They can still only have $645, so now their monthly spend down is $1,355. So there really is no incentive for people with disabilities to go to work, even though they could, because quite likely going back to work, they're not going to make enough to pay rent, food, heating, and still be able to pay for the services that they need to survive. So the Medicaid buy-in program is designed as an optional Medicaid to create the optional Medicaid eligibility groups that are intended to remove Medicaid financial barriers to work for persons with disabilities beyond those imposed by federal work incentives. The state Medicaid program establishes the opportunity for persons to become eligible and remain eligible for Medicaid not previously available, and in contrast to certain work incentive provisions in the SSI and related Medicaid work incentives. It would allow adults with disabilities to earn more than would otherwise be, they would otherwise be eligible, so more than that $645, and they would pay a percentage of their income as a premium for Medicaid. The question is, if you are elected, would you authorize the Department of Public Health and Human Services to create this additional Medicaid program that would allow individuals with disabilities to return to work? And we're going to start down here on the right this time.
Well, thanks. That's a fairly easy answer for me. Yes, I would support something of that nature. Obviously, again, the devil's in the details, but the theory is something that I would strongly support.
I agree that I would fully support this. I feel like it's a no-brainer, and in fact, I've been lobbied by the residents that live at Homeward Developments that would like to work and find it to be prohibitive to seek employment when they're going to lose their Medicaid. I actually know this because my brother was one of those folks as well who, when he got a job and finally was able to work part-time, his self-esteem went up and his just general well-being and happiness. And so I think that, Travis, you summed it up pretty well, and I would support this.
I might also add, before anybody else answers, and I'm sorry I didn't say this at first, there has been an EP proposal for this, and the first year state estimated cost of this is $73, and then it's a little bit more expensive for the second year, but so I think it's right around $150-some thousand is what's in the executive budget.
150,000?
I can't remember the exact number. I know the first year is 73.
But the thing that's so clear, and this is what you said, Travis, which I agree with because I work in affordable housing, it's like when you allow someone to earn income, it reduces their dependence on other programs. Just like when you provide affordable housing, you actually allow people then to provide for their other basic needs. And so if it goes up slightly in the budget, we're going to see reductions in other areas. So that's the unfortunate thing. Sometimes that doesn't come out when you read a bill, but we have to know it and try it and increase it. I don't even know, when you said it's gone up a hundred last time, I looked to Teresa, I said, why hasn't it gone up 500 or 1,000? I don't understand. So you should spend a little bit more time with me because I'd like to see it go up quite a bit more.
I'll keep mine brief too. I've heard part of this discussion during the interim committees. Yes, I support the idea.
Even briefer, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm going to expand on it a little bit. Yes, but not just for this program. This is a pervasive problem. It affects all kinds of income maintenance programs and support programs for low-income people in Montana and across the nation. I knocked on the door of a woman whose
child had been diagnosed with autism, and she was facing dramatic costs. And her solution for trying to deal with this problem was to cut her work hours back to 20 hours a week so that she could qualify for benefits. That's ridiculous. You know, it's not right at all. And she was, deeply upset by it, and she should be.
Yes.
Yes.
I supported the $100 increase last time, and yes to the question.
Yes, but I think it's important to go back to, government should be removing barriers so that people can maximize their opportunities, not putting more of them in place for people. And I think this is a good case where we're, wasting the talents and abilities of a whole lot of people who would like to work and restricting them. In a country that says it so values work and individual opportunity, we in fact sometimes make barriers to that, and that's wrong.
I'm going to follow Diane with what she said. It was very well put, and I'm going to put it into a more practical situation. Having a friend that is a paraplegic, he was faced with a situation where if he was looking for a job, and one of the jobs he was looking at gave him more income, and he would lose his Medicaid benefits. Now, to me, I can't understand if someone is in a wheelchair, or if someone is blind, or if someone has another disability that is actually disabling them, how you could even imagine that we would cut back on their health care, because there's no private insurer that's going to insure somebody with, previous history. And so I just can't get into my head into that at all. And considering the living costs that keep going up, I think that base SSI or payment of $645 a month is so small. People's lives entail much more, they cost much more. And I realize that there are services of food stamps and things like that. But to allow somebody to progress to the maximum of their ability is important to any human being. And I would be inclined to look at a lot of the fraud that's in the system. I know that there's a lot of fraud in the mental health system and some fraud in the disability system. If somebody gets injured 10 years ago and has a small back injury that can't retrain for a job and they're still on services is something that bothers me, because I'm very into personal responsibility and accountability. But when you have people that need medical care and you say, well, we can't give that to you because now you make too much, I just don't understand that at all. So a buy-in program shows the responsibility on the disabled person, because he or she is proud of where they achieved and where they've come to. And I think that instead of penalizing them, that we should be saying, hey, you don't have to worry about this, just keep doing what you're doing.
I would like to echo Professor Barrett about the unintended and pernicious consequences of the provisions of some of these bills, and I'm glad that you brought this to our attention. I would certainly support this, because anything that moves people towards a more independent life and improves their quality of life is something that we should be doing.
The answer is yes, and the why is 2 sentences. People who work feel a part of society. They feel better about themselves and help society interact with them.
Thanks. The next question comes from Montana Association for Rehabilitation, who's also one of the sponsors for this forum, but it's also, I believe, an issue in the developmental disability system with Opportunity Resources, and it has to do with extended employment. The Extended Employment Program is a 100% state-funded program that provides ongoing support for people with significant disabilities so they can maintain appropriate employment. The program currently supports 185 people in community jobs across the state, people who otherwise would not have an opportunity to work and pay taxes. The wait list for these services can be from 6 to 9 months in Miles City, up to 11 to 13 years here in Missoula. This program needs continued funding, and an increase would help reduce the waiting list. All the people on the waiting list are individuals who have expressed a desire to work, but information reflects a need for long-term supports if that is to be successful. The State Vocational Rehabilitation Agency can provide initial supports to get people into jobs in the community. These services can last up to several months before people are stable enough to transition to the EE program. And at the candidate forum in Kalispell on Monday, one of the legislators there had a figure that here in Missoula there's 132 people on the waiting list. And that's the highest of anywhere in the state. So the question is, do you support extended employment services, and would you increase state funding for those programs so that we may be able to lower the waiting list time as well as lower the amount of people on the waiting list? And we'll start over here with Will this time.
Yes, I would, but as far as I know about it on face value, I'm kind of a numbers person, and I don't know what the cost or the budget is for those 185 people. If it's a reasonable amount, which it more than likely is, I wouldn't have a problem with funding it at all, but with the minimal amount of information that I have here on it, I can't really tell you what that number should be. But it seems to be, on its face value, a worthy cause and worth looking at.
I would echo Will, because I guess from what we have, we don't know how much now is spent or how well it is spent. And again, this would be a question of priorities and judging the other needs that you've come in front of us with. But on the face of it, it sounds like a good idea.
That was a question I had too, is how much is, and this is just a totally state program. You go through the state, through this program, because I'm not getting enough information out of this too. And I would also ask, are there private groups that help supply help for people in this program? Is there an offset in the community that helps before being able to say whether the government should fund it? Because again, I say I'm more inclined to personal responsibility, community help, local help, family help, things like that. So I can't really answer how I would decide by this information.
Travis, why don't you just tell us how much money's in the program?
Is anyone here from MAR?
Yeah, I figured Denise might know.
I am, but I'm not sure what the total budget is statewide.
Okay.
I'd have to go back. I don't have the number on the top of my head.
Okay.
Could you explain a couple of other things? I don't quite understand what is meant by community jobs. Are these jobs that
Well, just jobs in their own communities, I guess, yeah. Yeah, what it is like you have your sheltered workshops, and this is not what a job in the community, like a job that anybody else will go out and get, not something that's a workshop or sheltered or anything like that. Go ahead and just go up there and grab one.
Hi, I'm Janice Sharkey. I'm from Opportunity Resources here in Missoula. And we have the largest extended employment program here in the state, actually. And the individuals that participate in the program receive a variety of different kinds of supports, but primarily what we're talking about today is at work. And generally it involves a job coach that would come to their work site, depending on their needs, and help them interact with their supervisor at work and maintain a working environment for them. And if just basically provide the supports they need to do to keep the job and to maintain employment.
And to assist in the training.
Ongoing. I mean, it could be a lifelong program. If the individual needs it, then it's there for them forever. Some people do transition off of it though, and then of course someone moves up the waiting list.
Is the reason the waiting list is so long and so big because there aren't enough jobs, or is it because there aren't enough staff like the job coaches to help?
With the funding, they have so many slots across the state that have been allocated, and they have so much dollars for each region. And so the waiting list in Missoula is so long because we have so many people who need the supports in the Missoula area, and there's not enough funding to meet the needs of all those individuals who need it. It's managed through the Extended Employment Program. Reg Gibbs, I don't know if you've ever heard of Reg Gibbs. He oversees the whole program for the state.
Is this the crew that cleans the smoke on the base, is that a part of this group?
Some of those individuals on that group, yes, do have extended employment funding. Not all of them, I think 2 of them actually do.
Thank you, Janice.
An example is I have a woman that is disabled that has worked in the laundry in the hotel for years, and somebody needs to kind of come and check on her once or twice a month because issues will arise that if there isn't that person, she wouldn't have her job. And she's probably had it, I think, about 8 years. But there's been times when there's been bumps in the road, and without that person, she probably wouldn't have even kept the job for a year.
I just want to say, as a member of MAR, one of the things that may be helpful for you is just to understand, like all people, there's a spectrum of abilities. And so when we talk about extended employment, that's folks maybe different than legally binding, but maybe not, who really need more support. So if that helps.
Does anybody who already answered the question want to add anything given that information?
I am technically challenged today. This is more of a question. I had an individual that worked for me years ago that had a hearing disability, and he had sort of a shadow person that would come out to the work site from time to time to make sure. He had to use the telewriter or whatever it is that you use over the telephone. And they provided special tools and adapters to tools that we had in our shop. Is that the type of EE process that you're talking about?
It could be. We're also talking about reasonable accommodation. So it might have been that they just needed that particular information and technology for a short time, whereas some people in extended employment may need longer time information. In 15 minutes.
Thank you.
I guess I'll answer the question then. Yes, I support it. I used to work in employment and training. I certainly understand that for many people, having someone who can help negotiate different circumstances is important to keeping them employed and resolving problems as they come up. I would also say, though, this being 100% funded by the state is one of the issues. As we look at a number of these health and human services related issues, in some ways, the legislature's priority is to figure out how to maximize the use of matching monies of different kinds, whether it's federal-state partnerships or state-local partnerships or private-public partnerships, and that this stands alone as 100% state funding may be a very important program, but I think part of the issues become how do you find some other way to fund these services that doesn't rely totally 100% on the state dollars.
And if we could limit all the rest of the responses, and I apologize, we're just running out of time, to a minute.
Thanks. I support the program as well, and I think it's a good example of kind of what we face in the legislature. We don't have all the information, we don't have exactly the costs, but you deserve a direct answer, and to me the real crux of this issue is what is the reasonable time for a waiting list on a program like this? My answer to you is 1 to 2 years.
Yes, I support this, and I think one thing that would be really helpful when you are making this pitch for funding at the next session is to have those powerful examples and those success stories of people who are successfully benefiting and who are working and who are increasing their skills and their confidence and the benefits to employers in our community, as well as folks who are on the waiting list, and some of the ways that they would benefit if they had that extra leg up. I think those would be really powerful examples before committees, especially when you're requesting funding because of all the previous challenges we talked about. But yes, I do support this, and I'm very grateful for Opportunity Resources and helping folks who want to work to be able to do so.
I also support it, and again, not having the numbers, I obviously, and having asked a lot of questions, I'm still not fully familiar with it, but it sounds like, to use Betsy's phrase, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it sounds like it's money that goes a long way to produce a lot of benefit. So, yeah, sounds great to me.
I also support the concept. It's a great one. When it comes before a legislative committee, I'd like to see a list of every person in the state currently employed under this program. I'd like to see a historical list of people that have stayed in for years and years, people who've dropped off. I think it would be very persuasive.
I've watched this program, if that's the case, at the Ariel Fire Depot for 15 years. I think that's a contract, as long as the contract's been enforced, if not longer. And again, people are working, paying taxes, and they are reducing some of the costs of the program. In fact, maybe a significant part of the program. So what I've seen, yes, I support it.
I'm convinced of the need, and I'm convinced by the arguments I've just heard.
If everybody doesn't already know this number, you should write it down, 444-4800. That's the phone number that people need to have to call up and say you support the bill when you hear about it. And you also need to be able to give us examples of the cost effectiveness related to it. All of the are good ideas. What you need to help us with is this is an investment. This is what we will get out of it. 444-4800. They'll take 4 messages at a time, and you can call the entire legislature in 20 minutes if you are really fast. You could also do email.
Yes, I support it, and I agree with some of the suggestions. I think we do want to get enough of the stories and the numbers to be able to make a good argument. One thing that I think would be interesting also is to just talk about when you do list all of those folks who are working and break it down to, how much are they earning and how much are they paying into taxes, because I think that's a really strong argument for it giving back to the community and being a valuable resource for businesses. And it's clear to me that you should get some of the businesses, the woman who spoke about having someone here who employs someone that uses the services. It allows business owners then to recognize that this is a service that helps them keep valuable employees in their service for a long time. And someone that runs a small organization recognizes that having someone work for 10 years is much more valuable than having to have turnover every year and retrain someone. So thank you for that.
I support extended employment efforts. I worked for many years in the private sector with long-term disability beneficiaries and workers' compensation, injured and handicapped workers, and returning them in supported employment efforts. And I know that the results work. Unfortunately, in the public sector, there isn't the same attitude, but I certainly support this effort, and I would support at least maintaining the level we're at, maybe looking at Representative Sands' suggestions about finding other ways to mix some foundation or private monies with this effort so it doesn't rely solely on state funding, because any of these programs that have unique state funding and no other support are the ones that get a lot of attention. So maybe we could pursue some of those other alternatives.
Okay, we're gonna do one more question, then we're gonna open it up for public comment after one more. Yeah, we can open it up for public comment in like 5 minutes. Well, probably 10 minutes. So.
Actually, I'd like to hear it now. It is the dialogue is more helpful to us than just answering said question.
Could we wait until public? We will bring that next. Okay.
And we can, I think a lot of the questions, there's some more people that want to ask extended employment questions too. And so I'll go through one more, we got 2 questions, but I'm only going to do one of them. And if we can do responses in 30 seconds. And then I think that the majority of the questions that are going to be coming up are going to have to do with extended employment. So, or at least the 2 that I'm aware of. So, The last question that I kind of want to ask about is transition, youth transition from, and when I talk about transition, I'm talking about transition from high school age into adult life, whether that be to post-secondary education or into employment or wherever that transition may take a student. People with disabilities are the largest minority group in Montana, comprising 19% of the population. There are over 6,900 youth with disabilities in Montana high schools, and the dropout rate for youth with disabilities is twice the rate of their able-bodied peers who do not have disabilities. Transition for youth with disabilities means a coordinated set of activities for youth with disabilities designed with an outcome-oriented process which promotes movement from school to post-school activities, including post-secondary education, vocational training, and integrated employment, including supported employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, and or community participation. There are multiple issues. Transition's a very complicated thing, as I'm sure most of you are all well aware. It was requested, and I think put into the executive budget for this year, $100,000 per year, so $200,000 over the biennium. And I think that got slashed in half, so what's remained in the executive budget is $50,000 per year, so $100,000 over the biennium. And our question to you guys is would you bump that back up to $100,000 per year to improve the coordination of transition services across the state? Where this money would go, it would be channeled through the Montana Youth Leadership Forum to support the new My Life Transitions group that's going on. They got a new website. They just held a conference. It would go to support the statewide transition coordinator who is housed at the Missoula office of the Voc Rehabilitation Office, and other efforts to improve the coordination of transition services in Montana. So with that, would you, in 30 seconds or less, and this one's kind of a little bit more on the funding thing, I guess, but would you support bringing that funding back up to $100,000 a year?
Travis, do we get points for being brief? Okay, yes, I would support that.
Yes, I would support it too.
I can't be that brief. I will say that it's part of a like coordinated efforts that are currently going on, I think, related to transition. I know that currently the CHIP expansion will include people up to age 26 in a household. So quote, children will be able to be covered in a household related to Medicaid for health insurance. And the other thing that I'm aware of is that we're trying to provide support for the foster children program to have the support systems follow, that funding follow children or young people in foster care. So yes, but we've got to all work it together.
Yes, but I think the main point would be to make sure that you show how the $50,000 a year has been used well, and then you've got a great argument to go forward.
We wouldn't need this program if the federal government funded what it's supposed to do in a mandated program. It is an unfunded mandated program. The state would not have to pick up the difference for special needs folks. But yeah, I'll support it, but again, I need to see the numbers.
As a school teacher in public schools for 32 years, I've had many dozens of students with disabilities, and I know how they struggle. And I also watch some of them as they make that very difficult transition. So yes, I'll support it. Yes.
I would also support it, and again, I'd also like to see the examples, the positive examples of folks who've really been helped and how it's made a big impact on their lives. And if they would be willing to share those and give back too. In addition, thank you for having me. I have to run back to work. But you can reach me. My cell phone's 360-4762. Call, give me questions and ideas on how we can run some of these services better, find those efficiencies, and continue to make a difference in our communities. Thank you very much.
My answer is yes. I had some direct experience with this in my day job. I coordinated the Montana effort to lobby this in Washington, D.C. in June. We went back and spent time with all 3 congressional folks, and I'm happy to announce, with regard to foster kids anyway, that the bill was passed thanks to Senator Baucus primarily and signed by the president a couple weeks ago. It's the same program that Teresa mentioned where the money follows the foster kids so that when they turn 18, all of their services aren't dropped. My answer is yes.
My answer is yes, but also when I worked at the Office of Public Instruction, I wrote a grant that got over $1 million for dropout prevention. And I think one of the places this needs to be coordinated, since you mentioned the dropout rate, is through the Office of Public Instruction and programs that address a coordinated, efficient effort at doing dropout prevention for all kids in our school system.
The extent of what you call disabilities that I figured I might hear as that came down the line, I have 6 children, and and a deaf sister. When we talk about government becoming family members, we also open our doors to what I call some intrusions. As far as children with actual disabilities, I think that we need to start going back and working with the families so that they can be the providers for these transitions. I think that within the school settings, parents can be trained on how to better assist their children in life. And so I think I'd look at that before I'd appropriate more taxpayer funds and probably elicit more family responsibility.
I think this is a bit of a tricky issue because I guess I'd like to know where's the money spent now. I'd like to see some statistics about the effectiveness of it. And it seems like in this discussion that we've had a bit of discussion about overlapping services even on this board. And so I would like to have the services kind of coordinate their approach to some of these things. And I know that's difficult. And I get a sense that maybe this isn't happening as well as it could be. So there seems like to be a basket of programs. So I would like to have, I guess, statistics about where they work and how they work the best so that the money could be allocated the most effectively. It seems like with this number that amount of money wouldn't provide very much more. If you divide the number by the amount of money, Will found that out. How much was it, Will? $7 a piece. So I guess I'd like to know, what did that $7 a piece do for us?
Well, that's what happens when you tell your seatmate what you're doing. They take your thunder away from you. Before, I'm a numbers person, but I'm also on a school board, and I'm always troubled about dropout rates in our schools because we are mandated by the state constitution to make sure that we educate every person in the state. And we can't afford to have all these kids dropping out, whether they have disabilities or not. And yes, I did figure out that you said over 6,900, Travis, so I used 7,000 students, and $50,000 a year is $7 a child. That doesn't seem to me to be an awful lot of money. I'll bet I can find $7 a child if I'm elected to the legislature.
Okay, so that concludes the formal questioning part, and I thank you all for sharing your thoughts and positions on the issues. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to audience members to ask questions, but as audience members do ask questions, I'm going to ask you guys to come up here and use the microphone since this is being recorded, and we do need the audio. And so if we can take the one off, no, let's take the other one because that's the only one for that table. And so if you have a question, just come up here and line up. You may start. Yeah, after you ask your question, you might want to duck so the camera can get everybody, or sit down.
Oh, I'll sit down. Is it on? Can you hear me now?
No. Turn it over.
Okay. I'm Susan Kohler, which you're probably most familiar, if any of you are, with me as the CEO for Missoula Aging Services. But my comments right now because I'm going to be inviting all of you to a breakfast on November 6th to give you an education about some of the key issues related to the legislature as it involves seniors. But actually, I'm going to transform myself. One moment, please. I'm speaking now as a mother of a child with developmental disabilities, and I guess I want to speak to you particularly in the regards to the extended employment program. The school system works very hard to help our kids prepare for a meaningful life and to use the abilities that they have and to share some of their special gifts with the rest of society. And to consider my son, who has what's called Williams syndrome, which is a very unique and different syndrome, to wait expected possibly 6 years or more before he gets what I would consider job coaching for employment is completely ruins any effort the school system has made in preparing him, because he gets out of school and he has nowhere to go. And extended plan. I work full-time, and so in terms of parents' responsibility in helping with those transitions, I work hard to put my food on the table. My son will likely live with me because there's also an equally long waiting list on subsidized housing or on I should say supervised housing, and I'm fine with that, except I will die likely at some point, and he will need to have someone else care for him. But regardless, in terms of personal responsibility, and as a parent, I already am doing everything. I have to work with teachers because they don't understand the differences that each child with developmental disabilities have, and I have to do that and balance in a full job, plus I have another child, and I am a single parent. So speaking to parental responsibility and personal responsibility, I think I'm going way and above what an average person could do, and so we have to look at people and me as an example of that. To give you an example of how this would work, my son has worked with the YMCA in the summer in a pilot project. He cannot do any one of the jobs that are typically available for a person in that employment. What he needs is somebody to go in and take his strengths and take a little piece out of each job that he can do, create the job that has that, and then he's not a charity case to that Y. He is a productive, helpful person to that organization, and you can translate that into a business, but you need somebody who knows how to do that and then job coach them until they really understand that, and then you can back off. And that would make employers, whether they're private nonprofit corporations or business corporations, they would make it more willing to try it because somebody's coming in and doing the problem solving and working it out and making sure they get the job done, which no employer, whether they work for a nonprofit or a business, really has the time to do. And what you're giving that kid is an opportunity to be a productive member. What you're giving the community opportunity to is to see the neat gifts these kids have to offer, some of the compassion and just the really special things that they have to offer. So I think the extended employment program and the transition program are both incredibly valuable, and I think getting the numbers to you, but I know as a parent, I don't want to wait 7 years till my kid has an opportunity. I'd be willing to pay something towards it. I don't have a lot that I have to offer financially, and if you have a kid with a disability, you're already paying a lot more than your average person who raises kids just for some of the things that they do, like break things a million times and all that kind of stuff. So, and the other thing I want to comment is that everybody seems to be very excited about the idea of providing funding up front, like in school and education. We know the value of that. But our kids with developmental disabilities also need that same injection of support to make it through life at the time they graduate from high school and getting into the workplace. And it's the same kind of investment that we feel is important to our young kids getting their education and getting off. They just need a little more help. Thank you very much.
I probably don't have to sit down. So my name is Jane Lux, and I'm a case manager for Home and Community-Based Services here in Missoula. And we are one of the waivers, and one of my thoughts for the extended employment, we do get federal match, and if there would be a way to put some of the state funds from EE into the waivers, like the DD waiver, the mental health waiver, and the other waivers, so that we could get some of the federal match. We can't, I guess, do it with all, because not everybody is on Medicaid that's on EE, but maybe that would be a way. And the other thing I wanted to speak to is the last session, there was a mental health waiver started. The co-pilot was in Great Falls, Butte, and Billings. The Billings waiver is filled, but we did not get that in Missoula, and I think there's really a high need. And we were the other one to be considered and didn't receive that, but I think that there is a high need. I've actually had to help some people with mental illnesses move to Butte or to other areas to be able to get those services, and I don't think they should have to move. Thanks.
Another thing that I forgot to mention earlier before I turn it over to Bob here, is in front of you with the questions that we went through, you'll also notice a separate letter with state letterhead on it. And that was a document that was brought to the Kalispell Legislative Candidates Forum. And it is from mental health services or those kinds of services. And it's basically a list of the things that the legislature in 2007 funded for those services. And they want to let you guys know that they are very appreciative of what you guys did back in 07 and hope that you can refund all of those things at least the level that they were funded then. So that's what that is for.
Hello, my name is Bob Liston. I'm with ADAPT Montana. And I have a question that hopefully you won't be able to skate with just an easy yes or no question. Or at least you'll have to use your brain to answer it. We have an institution in this state. I still refer to it as Boulder River School. It will always be Boulder River School to me. I think that the last count I had, there were 85 persons who were residing at Boulder, and when I estimated the cost, we were the citizens of Montana were paying about $165,000 to $170,000 a year per person for each one of those 85 people to be there. During the last legislature, at the last minute, the state of Montana, DPHHS, went to the legislature to get more funding to build a new building on an institution that is supposed to be decreasing in size. My question to you is twofold. One, would you support more funding for Boulder? And two, does the economic needs of a community outweigh the civil rights of the individuals who are incarcerated in that institution? Anybody?
If I heard you correctly, you said, does the economic need?
One of the rationales for keeping Boulder open is that Boulder will die if the institution closes because of all the people who are employed there.
Okay, now Boulder, is this a youth facility or is this?
No.
It's a life. I've heard of Boulder, but I don't know much about it.
There are people who've lived there. It's for persons with developmental disabilities. There are people who have been placed there since practically birth. There are people who go there later as adults. We had an individual, I had a friend who went there for 6 months while her supports got straightened out here in Missoula, and 6 years later was able to get out. And they have a history of committing people. They continue to commit people, and it takes a year to go through the commitment process. So I could go on and on.
Yeah.
My question is, would you continue to fund that, and whose rights are more important? People with regular cognition, or people who might have something that the general public doesn't want to see on the streets?
When Bob talks about Boulder, Boulder is a town in Montana.
Yeah.
With a state hospital.
Yeah,
Or
I
not
know,
the state
I know about Boulder.
I'd respond to that if I could. My awareness, when we voted, I can't, I could literally go look up and figure out what we voted on this specific thing. But the way I make my decisions about voting, what you just said was not, I wouldn't have voted for that. I wouldn't have said, yes, I'm worried about the town folding. I would have said, if any of those persons who's been there for 80 years have nowhere else to go and now need hospice care, because that's what we're looking at the prison, because there's nowhere else for that person to go, then I believe that that person deserves the best accommodation and least restrictive environment in that situation. If that person cannot live away from a facility, and may or may not be open to being relocated at 80-some years old, or whatever the specifics were, then that's what I would take into consideration. But I didn't vote. If I voted to support Boulder, funding for Boulder, I didn't support it in order to keep the town of Boulder employed. I didn't do that.
Well, I did kind of want to address that, because I don't think that there should be any issue as far as keeping state jobs should come over the rights of any individual's life. And if Boulder is the only place, which I probably don't think that it is, that these people can be to live out their lives, there's other places, nursing homes, things like that, that the money saved from closing this facility, if need be, to help facilitate the care of these people in different situations is probably more important than an economic value, because human value is way over economic value or animal value. But we have a society that doesn't quite look at it that way sometimes.
I believe part of what happens when people are committed, then the services that they are looking for in the community go away because they're in this place, and then the waiting list, I mean, and then they just stay there for longer and longer periods of time. Does anybody else have questions? Oh, we have one more response here.
I'd like to say something about that, partly as a historian. You know, I think one of the most remarkable things is that we really need to recognize how much progress we actually have made, that we have had as a public policy over the last 50 years, because of the dedication of a lot of individuals in this room or family members who are now gone, to make sure that a principle of the dignity of the individual and deinstitutionalization and having the money follow it has really become the gold standard and the right thing to do here. It's both the constitutional provision that really recognizes the dignity of the individual. It's not just about the money. It is about the quality of life that every individual deserves, and that we've been working through that as a society for quite a long time and made considerable progress. When I work at the museum and people say, what's the most important things that have happened? One of the things I say is, in the last 50 years, people with mental disorders or physical disabilities are now parts of our community in a real day-to-day way that they never were before. We have a long way to go, but it is something I think we need to recognize, thanks to all of you and many other people, that we've achieved. And the efforts that you'll be making in the upcoming legislature are part of that long line of advocacy, and I think that's important to recognize. Thank you for doing it.
Well, I guess I'd just like to say that I would be shocked, I'm shocked to hear this in this day and age. And I think that we have a responsibility to the most vulnerable of our citizens. And if it is the case, in fact, that those commitments are difficult to get out of, then we should absolutely have some kind of a task force to look into it. And I would hope, sir, that with your information that you would proceed on this and make the larger community aware of it, because to me this would be a terrible scandal that the most vulnerable of our population would lose their civil rights. I do not think it's a question of economic needs. I think probably it may be a question of ignorance or whatever, oversight, but I'm absolutely appalled at what you told us if this is really the case.
Well, there has been the Olmsted decision. There has been the Olmsted decision, which those of you that have served in the legislature for any length of time are aware of, that came forth from the Supreme Court that said people with disabilities have a right to the least restrictive environment possible. And coming from years of providing services to all sorts of people, I still contend that there is no one who can't be served in the community, and that does not include nursing homes that's living in their own home. Some people may cost $165,000 a year, but on average it's way more cost effective than that. We also have the Travis D case here in Montana that is supposed to be moving that forward and moving people out of the institutions, and it just seems to me that people's lives are being wasted. And again, this is, to me, this is worse than someone who commits a crime and is committed to prison. At least they know when they're getting out. These folks, some of these folks went in as children, are there at 60, 70 years old, and there's rationale that, well, they don't want to go anywhere else. Well, they've never had a chance to see anything else. And I think that it's, it infuriates me that we continue to infantilize people with disabilities, regardless of their age, and we don't give them the same civil rights, the same human rights that we give everybody else, and everybody else takes for granted. So I'll get off my soapbox and let the boss speak.
I'm not the boss, but I am Mike Mayer with Summit Independent Living Center, and I just have a comment. One of the set of questions that we didn't have enough time to go through today are those listed under the home and community-based service and personal assistance programs at the end of the questionnaire that you received. And I just wanted to put a plug in that you'll be hearing from us between now and the legislature, and certainly during this session, about the importance of those two programs, because for any people with disabilities in this state who rely on Medicaid funding for their health care needs, if you require assistance with daily living tasks, such as many people do, those programs are key to quality of life and independence. And so the thing that I'm excited about this year is those 4 issues that you see there, which are additional funds to do away with the waiting list for the home and community-based service program, a wage increase for the personal care assistants who provide the direct care, a provider rate increase, and then making sure that the health insurance that the last legislative session approved for personal care attendants, the good news is that the funding is there to get the program rolling as of January 1st. The bad news is it only runs through June, so that funding has to be reauthorized. That's a key to kind of building a quality workforce. So parting thought is the disability and aging communities are working together on these issues. AARP has spearheaded a group called the Long-Term Care Choices Coalition, the Independent Living Centers, a lot of the area agencies on aging, AARP, and some various groups are working together on this. So I think that we can provide some consistent information about what the programs do and what the needs are. So your support on those would be greatly appreciated. And cost effectiveness, we can give you numbers. Marcia can, she's great on numbers.
Any more questions?
We do a relay handoff here.
I have to thank Mike for going over that, because I was going to go over that, but I don't have to now.
Could I make a comment? I want to return to the issue of Boulder for a moment. And I don't, I'm not familiar with all of the ins and outs of why Boulder has been kept open from a programmatic point of view, but I do have this comment about the notion that you would keep that you would have a program, that you would incur the cost of a program in order to maintain a local economy, to create jobs, for example, in Jefferson County, which is where Boulder is. That, unfortunately, is very often the kind of coin of the realm in our discussions about public programming in Montana, and I think it's frankly pernicious. I don't think you evaluate a program and you don't value a program because it has a positive impact on a local economy. You value a program because of what it produces, what it does, what kinds of values it promotes. An example of the perversity of that kind of emphasis on local economic impact from my point of view, maybe you won't all agree with this, but for a long time, the Great Falls Chamber of Commerce wanted to maintain weapons of mass destruction in every hole in the ground around that city because of its economic impact. Without regard to whether or not it was good for Montana or good for the nation or good for the world to have nuclear missiles all over the place, all that they cared about was whether there were jobs in Great Falls. And I think that's perverse. And I think that kind of decision-making in general is perverse. Certainly, if that's the only rationale for incurring the cost of a program in Boulder, Montana, then that's perverse too.
And my statistician just told me it's more like $250,000 per person now in Boulder.
So it doesn't look like there's any more questions from the audience. Do any of you have any questions for anybody out here or want to make any statements?
I wanted to go back to the personal responsibility aspect of being a parent. I think that there might have been a misconception that I was attacking parents of disabled children for not being there every day or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the first course of action in parenting. I know that my mother sacrificed quite a bit to be available around the clock for my little sister as she was growing up, and she still held her own job. Actually, she ran her own business. But what I'm saying is that today there's a lot of thought that since those services are available, that we as parents don't need to be. And that's what I was getting at more than climbing down someone's throat about it. And because I see too many parents taking the easy way out with normal children. You know, they don't attend school meetings, they don't help with homework or ask questions or anything like that because they feel that the teacher is the end-all, be-all. So I don't want to leave that impression with you at all. I'm just saying that first realm of responsibility in families, which everybody comes from, is the family itself and their involvement. And if that is not possible, since the lady that spoke said she's working full-time and she helps as much as she can, that's not, to me, is not irresponsible to me. That's, very responsible because not only is she providing for the emotional and mental and health of her children, but she's also providing for shelter for them too. So don't get me wrong on that, please.
My comment is, please help us in the tax revenue side as well. Time after time, people do a great job at coming and talking about individual needs, programmatic needs in the Appropriations Committee. We don't hear enough people saying, yes, we need revenue to do the work. So help us there. And I want to speak to one specific bill that I think that you'll like, and that's that this state has always had one good tax credit that helps people on the low end of the income scale, and that's the tax credit for elderly homeowners and elderly renters. Some of that law has not been upgraded for inflation since 1981. We need to have that bill upgraded. It will help a lot of people. Last session, we actually almost passed the bill out of the House, and then the Appropriations Committee got it. Hal Jacobson had the bill last time. I have the bill this time. Come and help us help the people who are on the lower end of the income scale and the elderly side. Thank you. It's tax credit for elderly homeowners and renters. I don't have the LC number on it yet, but in fact, it's going through the process.
So on behalf of the Missoula Coalition for Disability Rights, I would like to thank you all for attending today and for sharing your thoughts. And so that concludes our forum.